Refined question list for pedagogical bridging. Methodological and practical teaching questions. On the inferior function as a teaching touchstone. Jung makes much of the inferior function, whether it's the person is... Jung makes much of the inferior function. It's where the person is primitive, where growth happens, where the shadow lives. OPS places this in the demon animal. For a student trying to hold both frameworks, how do these descriptions align? Can you show how a Jungian case study of the inferior function work? Can you show how a Jungian case study of inferior function work looks when you reframe it through the demon animal lens? Does OPS provide additional clarity or just different language for the same phenomenon? Okay, so the question was framed correctly. On the inferior function as a teaching touchstone, the question was framed correctly. Jung makes much of the inferior function. It's where the person's growth happens. It's where the person is quote-unquote primitive. It's where participation mystique lives. It's where the shadow lives. We don't know if participation mystique is still kosher, like a cogent saying nowadays, but we speak to it in terms of theory, in terms of the historical theoretical implications. Okay, OPS places this in the demon animal, but it's different. In terms of objective personality with ordonnance, we're dealing with a numbered grant function stack from 1 to 4. So the grant function stack pretty much stipulates, is pretty much the anchoring schema, the rules behind why MBTI is 16 psychological functions, 16 psychological types instead of 8 psychological types in Jung's original definitions when he was giving the definitions. They read into the principal and auxiliary function and took it from there, where they found the 16 psychological functions, because they did the math in terms of adaptation and compensation. So for them, for the original orthodox conceptualization, we're talking about a function that lives in a specific place, in the 4th, in the 3rd, in the 2nd, in the 1st, in terms of its least differentiated to most differentiated. 4 being least differentiated, 3, 2, and 1 being most differentiated. In this example that we've been using, FESINETI, TI would be the 4th function, least differentiated. In the objective personality system, those functions don't exist anymore. They only exist with a masculine or feminine modality. So it would be feminine FE, masculine SI, feminine NE, masculine TI, and masculine TI would be number 4 in terms of ordonnance, and it would be the least differentiated function. That was the concept of where the Jungian shadow was referring to in terms of your least differentiated function. But one of the intellectual property achievements of the objective personality system in terms of technique is through their typing procedure, they determined using binary coins that there is actually a higher order combinatoric on top of the grant function stack, meaning functions linked to each other in a way that differentiates them against each other. Meaning for that same function stack I just mentioned, it could be blast, play, sleep, consume. It could be play, blast, sleep, consume. It could be blast, sleep, play, consume. It could be play, blast, consume, sleep. It could be blast, play, consume, sleep. It could be play, consume, blast, sleep. It could be blast, sleep, consume, play. It could be play, consume, sleep, blast. All these different combinatorics that echo different function combinations in relation to one another. This is what we're talking about. So in terms of the inferior function, that's how we would describe the inferior function in terms of objective personality technique. It's still in terms of 1 to 4, it's still in terms of ordonnance, recognized as the least differentiated function in terms of the Grant function stack. But where demons comes in is where the second intellectual property achievement is, and that's the animal functions. So they're operating as a higher order combinatoric, meaning they're linking functions as a mode of differentiation. And in that context, we're saying, okay, so let me read some out. Blast, play, sleep, consume. Blast, sleep, play, consume. Blast, play, consume, sleep. Blast, sleep, consume, play. All of those are non-jumpers. Those are your standard MBTI variations, kind of, because the first function is 1 to 2 instead of 1 to 3. For the jumpers, you have play, blast, sleep, consume. Play, blast, consume, sleep. Play, consume, blast, sleep. Play, consume, sleep, blast. And this is for this type that we've been using to demonstrate this. This is MFFESI, blast, play, sleep, consume. So in this context of the first list that I wrote, blast, play, sleep, consume, blast, sleep, play, consume, the demon function would be the consume last. That would be your demons, a part of your demons. It's third, fourth toggle. Most people definitely have a problem on their fourth function, and some people have a problem on their third function. So for a student trying to hold both frameworks, how do these descriptions align? Well, I'm just going to go over it again. Can you show how a case study of the inferior function looks when you reframe it through the demon animal lens? So the inferior function would be, normally, it would be the last function. So if we're talking about feminine FE, masculine SI, feminine NE, masculine TI, then the demon function or the inferior function would be TI, masculine TI. But because we're adding a higher order combinatoric in terms of the animal functions, then that means that the last animal function becomes your demon function. So let's walk through the different permutations. First, we have blast, play, sleep, consume. That's our main anchor. And then in there, consume is last. So we're going 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 2 to 4, 1, 3 to 4 in terms of consume. So that 3 to 4 is our consume last. Same thing with, or for blast, sleep, play, consume, we're doing 1 to 2 blast, 2 to 4 sleep, 1 to 3 play, and 3 to 4 consume. In both of those examples, consume is the demon function. It's one of the two demon functions if you consider it half and half. Like for most people, they struggle with both. I'm trying to figure out if that's true. I don't know the statistics. I would put it as a 60-40 oscillation differential heuristic, where we're saying that 60% of the population struggles with 2 out of 4, and then 40% only struggles with 1, something like that. And then we have blast, play, consume, sleep, and blast, sleep, consume, play. So in those examples, sleep is the demon function and play is the demon function. So that would mean blast would be 1 to 2, blast, 1 to 3, play, 3 to 4, consume, 2 to 4, sleep. And for blast, sleep, consume, play, that's 1 to 2, blast, 2 to 4, sleep, 3 to 4, consume, and 1 to 3, play. This is a conceptualization of what the inferior function looks like reframed through the lens of a demon animal. When someone refers to a demon animal, they refer to that last animal function. So we listed off the ordonance and the animal function to give you an idea of what that looks like in terms of animal function activations. 1 to 3, 2 to 4, 1 to 3, 3 to 4, 1 to 2, 2 to 4. Different permutations based on them. So if we do play, blast, sleep, consume, then we have 1 to 3 play, 1 to 2 blast, 2 to 4 sleep, and 3 to 4 consume. So consume would be the demon function, even though, well, that's kind of normal, right? So let's see if we can find another example where consume is not the demon function. Here, we have one where blast is the demon function, and we have one where play is the demon function. So in the example where play is the demon function, then you have blast, sleep, consume, play. So what does that look like? That looks like 1 to 2 blast. That looks like 2 to 4 sleep. That looks like 3 to 4 consume, and 1 to 3 play. So let me say that again. Blast, sleep, consume, play. Blast, sleep, consume, play. That's 1 to 3, that's 1 to 2 blast, 1 to 2 blast, 1 to 2 blast, 2 to 4 sleep, 3 to 4 consume, and 1 to 3 play. So that demon function is going to be activated on the NE and the FE. Blast, sleep, consume, play. So that's double activated demon function, or I don't know the difference between double activated and single activated yet, but NE is double activated because it's blast, sleep, consume, play. So we're going 1 to 2 blast, 2 to 4 sleep, jumping over NE, because you can't do 1 to 4 connecting, you can't do 2 to 3 connecting. So blast, sleep, consume, play, 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 3 to 4. So why is it 3 to 4 instead of 4 to 3, since we're going up from the... Because adaptation compensation still comes from the most to the least differentiated. That's why the grant function stack remains static. If we're talking about adaptation and compensation, where it's a higher order combinatoric, it's moving very fast. It's adaptation, compensation, flash, adaptation, compensation, really just moving like that. So it's 1 to 2 blast, 2 to 4 sleep, 3 to 4 consume, and 1 to 3 play. So that means that the demon function is that single activated FE, since the FE is only activated once. single activated FE, double active, less activated NE. But do you get what I'm saying? On the inferior function as a teaching touchstone, Jung makes much of the inferior function. It's where a person is primitive, where growth happens, where the shadow lives. OPS places this in the demon animal. For a student trying to hold both frameworks, how do these descriptions align? Can you show how a Jungian case study of inferior function looks when you reframe it through a demon animal lens? Does OPS provide additional clarity or just different language for the same phenomenon? It provides additional clarity for the same phenomenon because we would be talking about inferior functions, but because of the higher order combinatoric, you might get a tick rate or a touch rate or an adaptation compensation oscillation that includes a function where, like blast, sleep, consume, play that I was talking about, where 1 to 3 is actually the demon function. So it's getting less activated on the first function and it's getting less activated on the third function, FE and NE, both feminine in this example. And another example would be play, consume, sleep, blast. Play 1 to 3, consume 3 to 4, sleep 2 to 4, and blast 1 to 2. Play 1 to 3, consume 3 to 4, sleep 2 to 4, and blast 1 to 2. So that blast is actually a demon function, but it's not an inferior function. The inferior function stays static. The grant function stack stays static. The TI is still at the bottom of the function stack, and that is what actually describes the difference between the inferior function reframed through the demon animal lens and how objective personality provides additional clarity in terms of differentiated language for a different function stack, in terms of the function stack itself moving from 8 functions of consciousness to 8 Jungian functions to now 16 Jungian functions, or OPS functions if you will. Post-Jungian, neo-Jungian functions. 16 neo-Jungian functions, meaning we have 64 grant function stacks. Differentiated grant function stacks. 64 differentiated grant function stacks. And then we move into the second permutation. So if the first was moving from 8 psychological functions to 16 psychological functions in terms of intellectual property, and the second is moving from that 64 stack, that 64 grant function stack, to 512 in terms of times 8. So 64 times, let me make sure I have my math right. Yeah, 64 times 8 is 512. So there you have it. On the inferior function as a teaching touchstone. What are the similarities and what are the differences between orthodox Jungian psychological functions and orthodox Jungian psychological types and the objective personality system? That higher order combinatoric keeps the grant function stack stable, it keeps it static in terms of most to least differentiated, and we're adding a higher order combinatoric so that animal function can actually be less differentiated even if it's the first function. If that makes sense. Leave comments in the description if that still troubles you. I hope I did a decent job of explaining it. On the inferior function as a teaching touchstone. Jung makes much of the inferior function. It's where the person is primitive, where growth happens, where the shadow lives. Similarly to OPS, right? They're always focusing on applications / technique about becoming a better person as a result of conscious competence. OPS places this in the demon animal. For a student trying to hold both frameworks, how do these descriptions align? Can you show how a Jungian case study of inferior function works? Can you show how a Jungian case study of inferior function looks when you reframe it through a demon animal lens? Does OPS provide additional clarity or just different language for the same phenomenon? So from a demon animal lens, that inferior function work is going to look like working on your demons, or working on conscious competence through your saviors, and so you can hold more space for your demons over time, if you want to talk about them as demons instead of your inferior functions. Inferior animal functions works too. The language is peculiar, but it still works. It's just a little bit touchy in terms of, why does it have to be saviors and demons? Why not just inferior and superior? Because it's subjective personality and their intellectual property. It happens. But that's the case study of inferior function work, like actually working on your demons, actually working on that last function. In the blast, sleep, consume, play example, working on that play. In the play, consume, sleep, blast example, working on that blast. Working on 1 to 3 for the play, working on 1 to 2 for the blast, and actually understanding the flavor of that animal function, which we can go in depth at a later date. So there you have it. Leave a comment if you need more explanation.